starting.
Right.
Okay. Are we all set to go?
Yes.
Fantastic. Welcome and good evening.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Daryl, you get started. I'm sorry.
No problem. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the breakout session on Swing Space. I'm Daryl Johnson. I am the Director of Strategic Outreach. I help manage the engagement for the school division around large engagement projects, as well as updating the Engage with APS website and keeping the community engaged about various initiatives or projects that are underway in the school division. Now, I would like to also introduce my colleagues with me. So we have Ileana Gonzalez. She is the Director of Strategic Planning. And then we have Lois Kuntz, one of our planners, as well as Rosa Cheney, our FAC Emeritus. And so everyone, while we're going through the presentation, if you do have questions, please submit them using the Q&A feature. Once we get through the slides, we will answer the questions. And then any questions that we aren't able to answer, we will probably sometime, hopefully by the end of this week, have them posted on the FAQs under the pre-CIP webpage. And now I would like to turn it over to my colleague Lois to begin the presentation.
Fantastic. Thanks, Daryl. Good evening, everyone. Swing Space is a facility that can be used by a school while its building is undergoing extensive renovations. The space has to consider the needs of elementary age students and ensure that they have access to the resources necessary for teaching and learning. The CIP directed the superintendent to prioritize renovations for existing APS school facilities and to identify and develop swing space if needed, and to begin construction on the first project by the fall of 2026 if feasible. APS needs to be prepared with the best possible way to support students once renovations are set to begin. These are parallel processes. The recommendation to repurpose Nottingham Elementary School for swing space is coupled with the long-range plan to renovate existing facilities, which will include this prioritized list of facilities or schools in need of renovation this fall. I'd like to add that there is a rotation focusing on that topic as well this evening, and if you have more questions, I invite you to attend that session following this breakout group. This decision is necessary to prepare ahead of the elementary school boundary process, this swing space process. And as a recap, the school board, once they provide guidance, provide guidance through direction this fall. The confirmation of the swing space plans will be made next June in 2024. And following the June CIP vote, APS will need to adjust boundaries for all elementaries, including any impacted by swing space. Next slide, thank you. The swing space report highlighted in the pre-CIP report in Appendix J details the process that we went through to identify a recommended swing space site. To identify the recommended site and possible alternatives, APS outlined a work plan with 4 tasks. The first task was an evaluation of, an assembly of options where we ended up with a list of more than 60 possibilities to look at. During this task, the list was developed with APS staff, with the Facilities Advisory Committee, also known as FAC, and with the Joint Facilities Advisory Committee, also known as JFAC. Included in this list, as an example, was look at commercial properties. And the team looked at over 20 commercial properties that were currently listed as available in that case. The second task was defining educational specifications, which is what is needed for space to be usable for use as a temporary school for students and staff while their building is being renovated. This may include specific minimums of square footage, numbers of classrooms, offices, types of spaces, spaces for specials like music, art, PE, spaces for our specialists, space for food services, including lunch service, recess, extended day, and so on. The third task in our process was establishing the additional criteria for evaluation. In other words, the non-instructional criteria. Examples include space for students to play outdoors, parking, ground floor egress for younger students, and so on. Here are some of the examples of how the APS team began to winnow the 61 sites while looking at some of these considerations and to shrink the list. For example, one of the sites to consider was the Barcroft Sports Complex, but that was found unsuitable for elementary school in a previous study in 2016. We looked at building a relocatable village on private property, and when the team reached out to Arlington County Real Estate Bureau and CoStar and MLS, there was no available land meeting our acreage requirement that was available. The property at 601 South Carlin Springs was considered until the team learned that the county is planning to redevelop that for other purposes. Two sites to host an upper and lower elementary school was eliminated in this stage because it would divide a school community, but it was also because of the complexities of operations for teaching and learning, and there were no two sites identified. So you can find out more about the details of all the sites that were removed from the list in Appendix J, specifically page A186. We found that once the minimum requirements and the evaluation criteria, the educational specifications were applied, we were really left with 16 sites to evaluate for swing space. And then the last task 4, was evaluating all of the remaining sites with all of the criteria, such as the timeline involved, the ballpark costs, the transportation complexity, the security, and other issues that you can find in our appendix. So during this task, 8 more sites were removed. For example, having 2 schools in 2 different shifts in the same building, in one existing elementary building, was removed because of the complexity with staffing, the need for earlier and later hours, which may be difficult for families, the impact on 2 schools, the limits on after-school activities, and the community use of the facility. Another one that was eliminated at this point was building a temporary relocatable complex next to an existing elementary school. Relocatable complexes are costly and subject to time-limited permits, and we were not able to identify a site with sufficient blacktop, which the alternative would have necessitated very complex and costly stormwater mitigation. The final one I'll just mention as an example was looking at tearing down and building new at the Lee Community Center, which would have involved a very high investment in a new building where, according to our projections, capacity is not needed. So this left us with the 8 sites that you see on this page. We found them all to be viable, and the school board may consider all of them. They may continue to consider them, I should say. We have labeled our recommendation, the staff recommendation, as repurposing an elementary school. That meets the minimum requirements and the educational specifications. Depending on which school was selected, we could see that this would have the lowest potential costs for repurposing a facility, leaving our CIP funds available for the renovations of other school facilities. And finally, we could see that there were 11 neighborhood elementary schools projected to have 90% capacity utilization or lower in 2026. And so we stood up a separate study, which we'll speak about in a moment, to determine which school made the most sense so that we could reassign the students via a boundary process to schools near them. All right, I think I hand off to Ileana at this point.
Thank you, Lois. Good evening, everyone. The swing space school site recommendation in Appendix K follows up on the swing space report, which concluded with the recommendation to repurpose an elementary school with existing available capacity in the northwestern area of the county. Since the recommendation of the first study group was to repurpose an elementary school APS decided to do a separate analysis to identify which elementary school would be the most viable and least disruptive. We wanted to give the community ample time to learn and understand this recommendation ahead of the school board direction in October and the vote in June 2024. To arrive at this recommendation, APS looked at schools with projected open capacity identified in the pre-CIP report. The area with the most open capacity and with the flat to declining enrollment in adjacent schools is along the north and western edges of the county, or Zone 1. In addition to looking at Zone 1 for excess capacity, APS looked at projected capacity utilization under 90%. All schools with capacity under 90% were identified, such as Ashland, Discovery, Drew, Fleet, Jamestown, Long Branch, Nottingham, Randolph, Taylor, and Tuckahoe. Figure 1 on page 8-11 demonstrates this exercise. When we looked at Randolph, for example, we could see that students could potentially be redistributed to Drew Elementary, but could not be distributed to Abingdon, Barcroft, or Hoffman Boston, which would make it ineligible for swing space, since other schools would not have capacity to accommodate students. Adjacent open seats are important for reassigning students near their home schools with space for them. The schools that do have open seats are Discovery, Jamestown, Nottingham, Taylor, and Tuckahoe. The schools that would require the fewest student reassignments and maintain the most walkers is Nottingham, the recommended swing space site. The rationale for repurposing Nottingham for swing space includes surrounding schools have a capacity to welcome reassigned students in a boundary change, potential overlapping walk zones with Discovery and Tuckahoe. You can see a 2018 study reference in footnote. Currently has 5 relocatable classrooms and space to add more if needed. The missing middle expanded housing options and plan lengths and boulevard area plan are accounted for in APS projections. New students are not expected in the next 10 years, and if enrollment in this area increases, Nottingham could be returned to a neighborhood school. The table shows Zone 1 elementary neighborhood schools comparing Zone 1 capacity utilization with Nottingham as a neighborhood elementary school and without Nottingham as a neighborhood elementary school. Zone 1 without Nottingham as a neighborhood school is projected to be at 97% capacity utilization in 2026-2027 and declining. Zone 1 with Nottingham as a neighborhood elementary school is projected to be at 86% capacity utilization, declining to 77% in the out years. This information shows that even with repurposing Nottingham for swing space, there are enough seats in Zone 1 to reassign students according to our projections. If the school board votes to repurpose Nottingham as swing space, the fall 2025 elementary boundary process will assign Nottingham students to nearby elementary schools with capacity. Receiving schools may have some students reassigned to another nearby school to accommodate Nottingham students. Neighborhood elementary schools in Zone 2 that border Zone 1 may also be part of the boundary recommendation. This process will be guided by the boundary policy, and we just wanted to note that the school board is scheduled to update the policy and create a corresponding boundary policy implementation procedure in 2024. We wanted to also show that we have some frequently asked questions in our website, and we wanted to make sure that you all know that you can check out our website for more FAQs. One of our FAQs was wanting to be preferable for the students from a school under renovation to attend nearby schools for a year or two rather than close an elementary school. And this idea was thoroughly evaluated, but ultimately not pursued for several reasons. The first reason is that spreading out students from the school under renovation would disrupt both their community and the communities that they're receiving schools for every project, every year, or every other year. Those same receiving schools would be required to host new groups of students for each renovating school, presenting new disruptions with each new project. Only a limited number of schools, like you noticed before and I showed you, have sufficient number of open seats, and nearby schools may not have enough open seats to accommodate all of the students from the school under renovation. And providing transportation and distributing staff across multiple schools every other year would be extremely complex. This is just an example of one of our frequently asked questions. We also have a separate one, a few others for our pre-CIP report, but we have specific for swing space. Another frequently asked question that we've been getting is why wasn't transportation study completed before recommending Nottingham to be repurposed? And the swing space study was completed in April. because we did an entire year of the 4 tasks, like my colleague mentioned before. And as a result, the swing space study evaluated if a neighborhood elementary school for swing space. And so the second study evaluated the neighborhood elementary school, the specific site. So the traffic mitigation is always considered at every school and every process. And if the June 2024 CIP action directs APS to repurpose Nottingham for swing space, then APS will address the concerns at the site based on the anticipated changes. And another frequently asked question that we have been receiving is, can renovations be done without using a swing space? For example, in the summers. So smaller projects are scheduled during school breaks and may be done without using a swing space, but major renovations can be extremely disruptive to the school and community. APS believes it is more appropriate to use a swing space if possible during major renovations to limit academic disruptions to students, safety risks, and costs. And experience has shown it is in the best interest of the school community to be relocated during major renovation. And this is an industry best practice, especially for elementary school students. And then finally, we had several questions about what is the long-range renovation plan to renovate existing facilities, and when is it going to be available? We do have a session on that tonight as well. Invite you to attend to that, and that is going to be available this September. But that includes an evaluation of each school, identifies schools with the greatest need for renovation, and it's going to provide the superintendent and the school board with a prioritized list of schools. And it's going to be able, and this is going to be able to be shared before the school board CIP direction in order to prepare cost estimates for top priority schools, in order to include as many renovations as possible in the proposed CIP, the next CIP. All right, and now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Daryl.
So for Swing Space, the messaging that we are sharing with the community is we encourage you to give feedback through the September 15th, 2023 engagement window. And this is prior to the October school board vote on the CIP direction. There will be a public hearing held before the June 2024 vote on the FY 2025 to 34 CIP. And beginning in June 2024, if the school board votes to repurpose Nottingham as swing space, APS will provide periodic updates on next steps for staff and families preparing for fall 2026. Again, for staff, we want people to know that with our normal attrition rates across the school division, we will have staff that will be able to be reassigned to other schools. And then HR will give Nottingham staff priority to fill those vacant positions at other schools before other staff. And then for families, we are assessing various options to accommodate families to make sure that if this were to move forward, this will be a very seamless transition for all families to make sure that it isn't really a disruptive process. And then options will be shared with families after the school board vote confirms plans for swing space. And again, as we went over in that general session, this is an ongoing process. The decisions have not been made. We are still collecting feedback. And I really want to emphasize again, this feedback is being gathered and it's going to be presented to the APS leadership, which is the superintendent's cabinet, as well as the school board. So before a decision is made, they do have informed information from the community about their thoughts about the proposals and recommendations that we have shared. And so we have the community table session number 1, which is today. Staff will be at the Arlington County Fair in person, August 18th to 20th. On August 22nd, we'll have community table session number 2, which will be in person at Kenmore Middle School starting at 6 p.m. September 11th, we will have community table session number 4, which will be focusing on Nottingham as swing space, and that will be virtual. And then again, feedback to date on all items will be summarized for the school board. So that's why we're requesting people to submit this feedback by September 15th so that we can review it, we can analyze it, we can compile it so that we can submit it to the school board. So people will still be able to provide feedback after that deadline when we get to the next engagement window. Before the first one, we really just wanted to make sure before the CIP direction is voted on, the school board does have feedback from the community. Next slide. And then again, we want everyone to participate in the thought exchange. This is the interactive community engagement platform. You can scan the QR code using your phone's camera, or if you go to the APS Engage page, you can find the information on the thought exchange and how to participate. And so people are able to anonymously share ideas. We really want you to provide your feedback in regards to the proposal to repurpose Nottingham as swing space, and then also to go back and rate the thoughts and the feedback that others do provide. So this is one of the ways that we can get feedback besides the survey, but it's kind of like social media. And so in the past, we've monitored kind of things that people have said in various online groups or listservs, but this allows us to directly have that feedback so that we can compile it and share it with the APS leadership as well as the school board. And so the exchanges will be open until September 15. And we encourage you to go back because since today was the first day they went live, the thoughts are just starting to be entered now, but you can go back and you can provide additional thoughts and you can also rate the thoughts of others. And now we want to go ahead and open it up to questions. So we have quite a few good questions. The first one is, the Nottingham swing space proposal appears to depend on large part on enrollment projections. How does APS's projection methodology account for data outside of Arlington birth rates that can nevertheless significantly impact student enrollment? For example, empty nesters move out and are replaced overwhelmingly with families with children born outside Arlington. Fewer families choose private school, etc. I did not see those factors discussed in detail in Appendix B to the report. And I don't know if one of my colleagues, either Ileana or Lois, wanted to respond to that one.
Yeah, if you can just publish it first, and then I was going to look at the.
Yes, so it's published now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I can go ahead, and I think Rosa can see them, right? You're good, Rosa? Okay, awesome. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, good evening, thank you. Yes, we definitely are looking at our enrollment projections. We do look at that. So if you notice when we talked about our enrollment trends, we're looking at that. And so the enrollment trends for Zone 1 is actually flat to declining. And so for the next 5 to 10 years, the Zone 1 is projected to that. And so our next, we feel very confident for the next 5 years about our projections, but we do update them yearly. And so I welcome you to look at our enrollment projections a little bit more carefully. But definitely, I think the question is asking about empty nesters and families that are born outside of Arlington. We don't look at families who choose private school. It's not a part of the projections, but we do work with the county for births, Arlington births. So we definitely are looking into that, and they are a part of our projections, our yearly projections that are factor in for 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, our projections are updated every year. Mm-hmm. And so as families move into the area, we do see that. We can't predict who will go into private school and who will stay public or go into public school, but we can observe it once it happens, and we have to work with observable data. And this is what we mean when we say we make data-based decisions. And our projections do look at trends, certainly, and they look at trends that are nationwide, that are regional. Our projections expert talks to regional projections people all the time. So it isn't just Arlington birth rates. I think we get accused of that sometimes. It's not just birth rates, although that's a piece of it. But if you really would like to understand the complexity of this very technical expertise, Robert has a recorded presentation about it on our website under About Us, Statistics and Enrollment. In that order, you click through, and it's one of the first links. So there's a full written report, but also a video presentation. This is very technical, and it is updated every year. And yes, we do look at missing middle, we look at immigration trends into the county, and so on. Thanks.
The next question is, can you explain the qualifications of the JFAC in the discussion?
I can jump in there. Stacy, who is our JFAC representative, has spent over a decade serving the schools and the county in the facilities advisory commissions on FAC and JFAC. She has spent countless hours educating herself on all things facilities, and we value her counsel very greatly. Thank you.
Next, the recommendation to use the NES to use Nottingham as swing space seems to rely heavily on enrollment projections. How does APS's planning methodology account for non-birth factors that can significantly, oh, sorry.
That's the same one, I think, yeah.
Okay, yeah, sorry. How does turning a thriving neighborhood school into a swing space align with APS core values?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So when we were doing this study, the first 4 tasks, we were charged with finding swing space for the entire division, right? And so we have these buildings that are in need of renovations. And so we're looking at making sure that we're able to provide a swing space so that our buildings are renovated. And these are major renovations. These are not renovations that we can do over the summer. So these are tough decisions. These are not easy decisions. But when we think of making sure that our students are in similar learning environments, we have to be able to make trade-offs as to what can we do if we want to renovate. If we want to renovate, we have to be able to have swing space for our students. And so it does align with our core values because we want to ensure that our students have similar learning environments. And so a part of having a similar learning environment is to have swing space. Our neighboring jurisdictions have swing space. It's not a new concept. We had swing space. Our last swing space was the Wilson building. I think the last time was 2001, Lois. I may be misquoting, but I think it was around there. But then we were growing, and now we're stabilizing. And so we're able to renovate our buildings, but our buildings need it. And so now that we're at a time where our buildings need it, we see it as an opportunity to be able to renovate our buildings.
Okay. The next one, I'm gonna skip the speaker didn't address relocating to local schools because you did after this question was posted. We can always return to that. I'm gonna move on to the next one. APS has stated walkability is a priority and agrees that proximity encourages the relationship between schools and community, allows walking and minimizes bus rides. Please explain how APS believes that it makes sense to shut down a school that is the second most walkable neighborhood school in the county.
Yeah, thank you for that. So when we looked at this, once we did the first study, right, we were like, okay, repurposing a neighborhood school makes the most sense for the district. But then we were like, what school? So then we had to do another study. And so when we looked at, and I showed the diagram, the figure of, we looked at 90% capacity utilization. So we had to look at what other schools have space, right? Because if we repurpose a school, then those students have to be reassigned to other schools. But not only that, what other schools have space, and what other schools could be also have that walkability factor. And Zone 1 has that opportunity where it is very walkable. Nottingham specifically has the best opportunity because they have 2 schools where students can actually walk to 2 other schools, because 2 other schools are less than a mile away from Nottingham. And so that's how we concluded that out of all the elementary schools, so we looked at all the elementary schools for swing space, and out of all the elementary schools for swing space, Nottingham was the best recommended site because we could still keep that walkability with reassigning the students to neighboring schools with open capacity.
Thank you. The next 2 are kind of related. One's a statement. We can't have a meaningful discussion without understanding the nature of the renovations and the impacted schools. And the second is the question, why is APS planning to close a school without specifying the construction plans needed and the timeline for construction at the other APS schools? If the enrollment is expected to climb in parts of Arlington, why not add an entirely new school in that region?
Yeah, thank you, Rosa. I can try to help because I think they're kind of coupled, without understanding the nature of renovations. So I mentioned the long-range renovation plan of existing schools. It's a mouthful. That's going to be coming out in September. So the previous CIP direction said, go find swing space, right? And so we found swing space. Now in September is going to be a list of schools that's going to be renovating. So what that means is that APS is going to be ready to renovate in 2026 because we found swing space. And so I know it seems a little odd that you would find swing space before knowing what school to be renovated would be renovated. But swing space is going to serve the district. So the Nottingham site will still serve the district because it's going to serve the schools that need to be renovated. So I don't know what schools are going to be needed to be renovated, but I do know that it's going to be a school in the district. And then the next school is going to be a school in the district. So I just want to make sure that we kind of understand that. The board directed the superintendent to go find swing space, found swing space. The list is coming out in September. So once that list comes out, we'll have more information about, what school, the timeline, and all of that. But we just want to make sure that the public knew that, this was the recommended site.
Thank you. Wouldn't families from impacted schools want the option to attend a more local school as opposed to blindly being bused somewhere? And then slightly, back to what we were just saying, how can we have informed discussion if you cannot share the impacted schools?
Yeah. So again, I think I answered that a little bit, but so it's very difficult because what we're saying is renovating school for 1 to 2 years, we need you to go to a swing space. But the reason we need you to go to a swing space is because we're renovating your building for you, right? For your student, for your family, for your community. And so we see it as a benefit in the long term for the community. We don't see it as something that we can do it while the students are in the school. We cannot do a major renovation while the students are in the school. We're not saying it's easy. We're not saying it's not complicated, but we're saying that this is the proposal that while the building is being renovated, the community for 1 to 2 years would be going to another school for a swing space, but they're going to get a renovated building. They're going to get a functioning, similar environment. I want to make sure I answered I think that was a 2-part question. Lois, did I miss?
Yeah, I think there was another part I can jump into, and I think I heard, why wouldn't it make sense to put them in a school closer to them? And there are several issues involved in that, and we would love to be able to do that. Practically speaking, resources follow students. We need to be able to move students in a predictable fashion. We will be bringing the community back together, and so scattering them to the winds for 2 years and then bringing them back together is very complex. The transportation aspect is very complex and costly if we're busing kids to multiple places from their home school. And very often we look around and we don't see a lot of room in neighboring schools. If you look at the detailed listings of capacity, we've got schools that are very unevenly occupied, but very few with extra capacity. But they all happen to be, with one exception that comes to mind, they all happen to be up in the same part of the county. And I think that the issue is that we would have to spread the students out among those schools repeatedly. Every year or two, we'd have to send in a new contingent of 100 students to each of those schools. From a staffing perspective, it becomes difficult to see how we would send specialists and counselors who know these students. We can't send them to 5 different schools, and how we would even keep our staff if we do that to them. So I think the idea of spreading the kids around, it's certainly something we looked at, but we don't see the possibility of keeping them close to home. And we see the same schools having to receive new new cohorts of students every year or 2 years as being something that would be disruptive on an ongoing way for the receiving schools, not just the school that's being renovated. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. I think we are running out of a little bit of time to allow for people to switch to a different group or whatever. As I understand, each of these questions are still going to be taken in and responded to in writing. Is that right, Ileana and Lois? Okay, so I think maybe there's time for, I think, one more.
Rosa, I see a couple of folks suggesting that we're being secretive about the renovation plans, or that we're refusing to talk about that. I would encourage you to go to the session on long-range renovations right now. This has been in progress for over a year, and it is a long process. It is a detailed process, and I know they would be really happy to tell you about it.
Yeah.
Just a quick answer to that.
That's a good answer. Yeah. Okay, and then. Oh, this is staff's presentation presents closing Nottingham as the recommended action, but does not rank the alternatives. What would staff's recommended action be if its recommendation to close Nottingham is not accepted by the school board?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a great question. So that's why we were definitely thoughtful about that. We gave one recommendation as a staff, and we stand by that. So we're giving one recommendation, but we're giving alternatives. And the point of the alternatives was for, the board to look at it in terms of, comparing it to each thing. So with the long range renovation plan of existing facilities coming out, I think it'll be beneficial to compare, but definitely staff stands behind the recommendation.
And there was, I think I wanted to kind of help explain, because I see one of the other common questions is more about the long-range renovation plan and then Nottingham being proposed first. And so the reason why the proposal or the recommendation came out in regards to having Nottingham being used as a swing space is because before the CIP, when the CIP direction is going to be made or finalized in October by the school board, they have to say that we're proposing, or we're directing the superintendent to have a school included in a CIP for swing space. And so that's why that is coming out. And so while that's still being worked on as we're actually leading, so from the CIP direction, which will be October until June, then once we have the long range report, then we'll work through that. And so that's why, because I think I've seen that a lot. We've gotten that question a lot from Engage, kind of trying to understand how we're proposing to use a school as swing space before we know which schools need to be renovated. And so I think also a part of the short answer is, even though we don't know specifically which schools need to be renovated, and so part of the long range renovation plan is determine how we're going to prioritize schools, we do know that we do have quite a few older schools that do need to be modernized. And so that's why we know that there is a need for a swing space. And so it's just kind of the process and how it's working through. And so that's the reason why there was the proposal to select the school for swing space and go through the considerations. And then shortly we'll have the report in regards to the prioritization. So I just wanted to kind of address that, because I've heard that a lot from people in the community, really trying to understand how that process works and why it seems like we're putting the cart before the horse, I guess, as some people would say.
Okay, I think we're gonna prep for our new session. All right, thank you everyone for coming. We're gonna make sure we answer the rest of the questions in our website, so you'll see those in the next few days. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you for your patience tonight.
Yes, and I just want to quickly add, we do have a record of the questions, and so we will try to get as many of the questions answered as soon as possible and have them posted on the webpage. When we send out the engaged message on Thursday, we will probably have an update just letting people know that the FAQs have been updated. And so even for some of the ones that we do have, if there is additional information based upon questions that we have received, we will update those and we'll put next to the questions, when it was updated, if it's been updated since the FAQs were originally posted. So again, thank you for coming to this session, and have a good day. And if you have any additional questions besides the ones you submitted, please submit them by emailing engage@apsva.us. And then, Ileana, if you could just share the presentation again, I will put it up and we'll just wait a moment or two for people to kind of leave and others to come in.
Yeah, just the people is kind of weird, but it was okay, right?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming to the second rotation of the Swing Space breakout session. I am Daryl Johnson. I'm the Director of Strategic Outreach. I handle a lot of the engagement and communications around a lot of the large initiatives and projects that are underway, as well as managing the Engage with APS website. And I do also want to introduce my colleagues that are on the meeting with me. We have Ileana Gonzalez. She is the Director of Strategic Planning. We have Lois Kuntz. She is one of our planners. And then we have Rosa Cheney. She is the FAC Emeritus. And now I would like to hand the presentation over to my colleague Lois, and she will share some information in regards to the Swing Space recommendation.
I'll unmute. Thanks everyone for joining us this evening. We appreciate it. Thank you, Daryl, for the handoff. Swing Space, as you've heard, is a facility that can be used by a school while its building is undergoing renovations. The space must consider the needs of the elementary age students and ensure that they have access to all the resources necessary for teaching and learning. The 2023-32 Capital Improvement Plan stipulated or directed the superintendent to do three things: to prioritize the renovations of existing APS school facilities, to identify and develop swing space if needed, and to begin construction on the first renovation project in the fall of 2026 if feasible. APS needs to be prepared with the best possible way to support students once renovations are set to begin. And these are really parallel processes to lay the groundwork and prepare. The recommendation put forward is to repurpose Nottingham Elementary School for swing space, and that is coupled with the long-range renovation plan, which will include a prioritized list of schools in need of renovation, so that we can develop actual projects from that list, and that list will be coming this September. It is the follow-on to a year's worth of work or more, and so we did not want to wait. I will add that there was a rotation on the topic of the long-range renovation plan running concurrent to this, and it was recorded, so you can also look at that if you're more interested in what the long-range renovation plan promises for us. But this decision is a preparation that we need to have also to prepare for the elementary boundary process that we foresee, that you heard about in the overview at the beginning of the evening. And once the school board provides guidance through its direction in this upcoming fall, confirming whether or not we use swing space and what it might be, they will vote on a final solution in June of 2024. After that vote, APS will need to adjust boundaries for elementary schools, not only those impacted by swing space, but we have other concerns in the county as well. So we divided the work for this report into 4 tasks. The first one, we wanted to identify swing space alternatives. We worked with a cross-departmental team, including facilities and operations, finance and management, systems, academics, school support, diversity and equity and inclusion. And I will take a little bit of time here to talk about the 4 steps in our process, starting with this first task of identifying a list of possible candidate sites, so that you can understand really the process of how we got from over 60 sites to 1. So we worked with FAC, the Facilities Advisory Commission, and with the JFAC, Joint Facilities Advisory Committee, known as JFAC, to help us develop this list along with staff. And for example, one of the items on that list was to look at commercial properties. And our team consulted listings of available commercial properties and looked at over 20 of them to see what might have the requirements that we need for a school. The second task was defining those requirements, what's needed for a space to be suitable for use for elementary school students. And this can include everything from not only just square footage, obviously, and the numbers of classrooms, but the offices, the types of space for specials, art, music, PE, spaces for the specialists to work with students, food services, including lunch service, for recess, for extended day, and so on. So that was the second task, educational specifications. The third task was establishing additional criteria that we needed to add to our evaluation above and beyond the academic pieces there. Examples include green space for students to play or for outdoor learning. There needs to be ground floor egress for the younger students, parking, and so on. So here are a few examples of how the APS team began with 61 sites and began to winnow that list. For example, one of the sites was to consider the Barcroft Sports Complex, but it was found unsuitable based on a study that was conducted in 2016 for reasons that had not changed. So it did not meet our requirements. One of the suggestions was to build a relocatable village on private property. And when we reached out to Arlington County Real Estate Bureau, CoStar, MLS, there was no available land meeting our acreage requirement. We looked at the 601 South Carlin Springs property, the former hospital urgent care center, and that was considered until the team learned that the county is redeveloping it for other purposes. We looked at having 2 sites host an upper and a lower elementary, and we eliminated that not only because it would divide a school community, but it added a complexity in operations and for teaching and learning and ultimately no two sites really were found that met the requirements. So you can find all the details of how we eliminated 45 of those sites in our appendix that lists in spreadsheets all of the things that we were thinking about. And then the final task before we narrowed it to the last 8 sites was looking at any remaining criteria. Things like the timeline, when a facility would be available, the location and transportation complexity, the security concerns, and the costs, as well as other things. So during this task, 8 more sites were removed for reasons including, let's see, one of the suggestions was to tear down and rebuild at the Lee Community Center. And that would be a very high investment in a part of the county where, according to our projections, that capacity will not be needed. We looked at having 2 schools use the same building in 2 shifts, an early and a late shift. This was removed because of the complexity of staffing, the need for earlier and later hours, which is also difficult for families, not to mention the children. It would impact 2 schools. It would limit the after-school activities and the community use of that facility after hours. So there were, I think, a lot of different reasons why very different considerations or possibilities, options were eliminated from our list. But then we ended up with 8 viable possibilities. We did look at their varying degrees of cost and complexity. Our recommendation, which is labeled here, which is the repurposing of an elementary school with existing capacity for swing space, is the one that we recommended, but the school board may continue to consider any options. This one does meet the minimum requirements and educational specifications. It is likely the lowest cost potential, leaving funds available for, this is CIP funds available for the very renovations that we need the swing space to support. And we saw that there were 11 elementary schools projected to have a 90% capacity or lower in 2026. So we did a separate study, and we're going to look at that next. But we really tried to find what made the most sense in terms of where we would close a school and repurpose it for swing space. The information on these additional 7 sites is all provided in the study for comparison for the school board to consider. And the costs that are provided are really ballpark costs. There's renovation, which is in the $40 to $50 million range, and building new, which is probably 70 or more million. So we've got all those considerations in there for you to look at and at least understand what our rationale was, and for the board to consider. And I'll hand it off to my colleague Ileana now.
Thank you, Lois. All right, the swing space school site recommendation in Appendix K report follows up on the swing space report, which concluded with the recommendation to repurpose an elementary school with existing available capacity in the northwestern area of the county. Since the recommendation of the first study group was to repurpose an elementary school, APS decided to do a separate analysis to identify which elementary school would be the most viable and least disruptive. We wanted to give the community ample time to learn and understand this recommendation ahead of the school board direction in October and the vote in June 2024. To arrive at this recommendation, APS looked at schools with projected open capacity identified in the pre-CIP report. The area with the most open capacity and with flat to declining enrollment in adjacent schools is along the northwestern edges of the county, or Zone 1. In addition to looking at Zone 1 for excess capacity, APS looked at projected capacity utilization under 90%. All schools with capacity under 90% were identified, such as Ashland, Discovery, Drew, Fleet, Jamestown, Long Branch, Nottingham, Randolph, Taylor, and Tuckahoe. Figure 1 on page 8 to 11 demonstrates this exercise. When we looked at Randolph, for example, we could see that students could potentially be redistributed to Drew Elementary, but could not be distributed to Abingdon, Barcroft, or Hoffman Boston, which would make it ineligible for swing space, since other schools would not have capacity to accommodate students. Adjacent open seats are important for reassigning students near their homes to schools with space for them. The schools that do have open seats are Discovery, Jamestown, Nottingham, Taylor, and Tuckahoe. The school that would require the fewest student reassignments and maintain the most walkers is Nottingham, the recommended swing space site. The rationale for repurposing Nottingham for swing space includes surrounding schools have capacity to welcome reassigned students in a boundary change, potential overlapping walk zones with Discovery and Tuckahoe. Currently, Nottingham has 5 relocatable classrooms and space to add more if needed. The missing middle, expanded housing options, and planned Langston Boulevard area plan are accounted for in APS projections. New students are not expected in the next 10 years, and if enrollment in this area increases, Nottingham could be returned to a neighborhood school. The table shows Zone 1 elementary neighborhood schools comparing Zone 1 capacity utilization with Nottingham as a neighborhood elementary school and without Nottingham as a neighborhood elementary school. Zone 1 without Nottingham as a neighborhood school is projected to be at 97% capacity utilization in 2026-2027 and declining. Zone 1 with Nottingham as a neighborhood elementary school is projected to be at 86% capacity utilization, declining to 77% in the out years. This information shows that even with repurposing Nottingham for swing space, there are enough seats in Zone 1 to reassign students according to our projections. If the school board votes to repurpose Nottingham as swing space, the fall 2025 elementary boundary process will assign Nottingham students to nearby elementary schools with capacity. Receiving schools may have some students reassigned to another nearby school to accommodate Nottingham students. Neighborhood elementary schools in Zone 2 that border Zone 1 schools may also be part of the boundary recommendation. This process will be guided by the boundary policy, and we wanted to know that the school board is scheduled to update this policy and create a corresponding policy implementation procedure. We also wanted to share that we have frequently asked questions on the website. And one of the frequently asked questions that we'll be sharing is wouldn't it be preferable for the students from the school under renovation to attend nearby schools for a year or two rather than close an elementary school? This idea was thoroughly evaluated, but ultimately not pursued for several reasons. Spreading out students from the school under renovation would disrupt both their community and the communities of the receiving schools for every project, every year, or every other year. Those same receiving schools would be required to host new groups of students for each renovating school, presenting new disruptions with each new project. Only a limited number of schools have sufficient number of open seats, like I showed you before, and nearby schools may not have enough open seats to accommodate all the seats from the schools under renovation. Providing transportation and distributing staff across multiple schools every other year would be extremely complex. Another question we're getting a lot is why wasn't a transportation study completed before recommending Nottingham to be repurposed? And the swing space study was completed in April. So as a result, the second study evaluating neighborhood elementary schools for swing space was conducted. And traffic mitigation is always considered at every school and every process. If the June 2024 CIP action directs APS to repurpose Nottingham for swing space, then APS will address the concerns at the site based on the anticipated changes. Another frequently asked question we've been getting is, can renovations be done without using a swing space? Smaller projects are scheduled during school breaks and may be done without using a swing space. However, major renovations can be extremely disruptive to the school and the community. APS believes it is more appropriate to use swing space if possible during major renovations to limit academic disruptions to students, safety risks, and costs. Experience has shown it is the best interest of the school community to be relocated during major renovations, and this is the industry's best practice. Another question that we've been getting a lot is, what is the long-range plan to renovate existing facilities, and when will it be available? The long-range plan to renovate existing facilities includes an evaluation of each school, identify schools with the greatest need for renovation, and will provide the superintendent and the school board with a prioritized list of schools It will be available in September of 2023 before the school board CIP direction to prepare cost estimates for top priority schools and include as many renovations as possible in the proposed FY 2025-34 CIP. We have more FAQs that you're more than welcome to see on our website, and we'll continue to build upon that, especially after today's community table session. And I will turn it over to my colleague, Daryl.
Thank you, Ileana. I wanted to share the Screen Space message to the staff and families, just kind of information about this process and where we are. So one of the things we've heard from the community is that we're only taking feedback until September 15th. And so the reason why is because this is one of the many feedback windows that we will have throughout the process. And so the reason why we have set the September 15th date is because before the school board makes their decision on the CIP direction in October, we really wanted to be able to analyze and compile all of the feedback we receive from the community, because we will share that with APS leadership, which is the superintendent's cabinet, as well as the school board, so that they can make an informed decision when they are voting on the CIP direction in October. And so there will be additional windows where people can provide specific feedback, but in addition, people can actually provide feedback at any time. But we just wanted to make sure we got that first initial set of feedback before the CIP direction in October. We will have a public hearing in June 2024 before they vote on the FY 2025-34 CIP. And then also beginning in June, if the school board votes to repurpose Nottingham as swing space, we will provide periodic updates on next steps for staff and families preparing for fall 2026. And some of the preparations we will make will be to work with staff, making sure that they are reassigned to another school. And then also they will have a priority in regards to applying for vacant positions at other schools. And for families, we're currently assessing various options to make sure that we are accommodating families as best as possible. Because if this were to be approved by the school board, we want to make sure that it is a smooth transition for families and it is not as disruptive as possible. So we just want to make sure that it is a very smooth process. Next slide. And then this is the timeline in regards to the community table sessions that we do have over the next few months. So this is community table session number 1. We'll be at the Arlington County Fair, October 18th to 20th. There will be a specific Engage with APS table. So I encourage you to please come up and speak to staff and ask questions. I know I will be there, so I hope to see some of you there as well. On August 22nd, we will have community table session number 2, which will be in person at Kenmore Middle School at 6 p.m. September 11th, we'll have community table session number 4, which will be focusing on repurposing Nottingham as swing space. And so this one will be virtual because we want to make sure that families, all families are able to actually participate, and those who aren't able to will be able to watch the recording at a later date. And then again, feedback to date on all items will be summarized for the school board by September 15th. Next slide. And then this is the timeline in regards to the process. So October 12th and 26th, there are meetings based on the CIP direction, which include repurposing Nottingham for swing space. However, that is not a final decision until June when the school board actually votes on their CIP. But until we get to that, we have another work session on May 14th, and that'll be to review the details of the CIP. There will be the superintendent's proposed FY 2025-34 CIP on May 26th. On June 6th, that's when the school board will present their proposed FY 2025-34 CIP. And the reason why there's a superintendent's proposed CIP and a school board's proposed CIP is because some of the items that are included in the superintendent's proposed CIP may not make it into the school board's proposed CIP, and then also vice versa. So some of the items that are included in the superintendent's proposed CIP, the school board may ask for additional things to be included or to have some changes occur. And so that's why there is a variation in between the two CIPs. June 11th and 20th, there will be a hearing and then school board action. And then there will be an elementary school boundary process, June to December for 2025, and they will go into effect for fall 2026. Next slide. And this is the information on how to access the interactive community engagement platform, which is Thought Exchange. And so this is a new resource that we do have to collect community feedback. And so one of the ways in the past we've gotten kind of broad community feedback or community sentiments is to kind of look at listservs and so forth. But this is actually going to help us because we can actually look at it, we can pull reports, and we can actually share this with staff as well as the school board. So I'm encouraging you to, if you have a chance, to please open your phone's camera, scan the QR code, take a few minutes to provide your feedback that way. It's just a quick general question, and then you can also rate the thoughts of others. And so since today's the first day of it being live, there aren't too many thoughts or feedbacks exchanges that you can rate. So I encourage you to come back in a couple of days and then just take another chance and to rate some more feedback. And if you have additional feedback based upon what you've seen, you can provide it as well. And the exchanges are open until September 15th. And now I'd like to turn it over to Rosa Cheney from the FAC Chair Emeritus, and she will assist with answering questions that we have received so far.
Yep. We just have a few. I'm not sure that we'll have time for many more, but if you have more questions, definitely put them into the Q&A. And I know APS will be answering all of the questions we receive tonight officially on the Engage website. So the first one that we have for tonight, the county board's strategic vision is to increase housing supply. The board chair explicitly said that they are trying to address a housing crisis in Arlington. The CIP report makes only passing mention of county policy. How do you reconcile a policy that will reduce school capacity and place most of North Arlington schools above 95% capacity when the county board is following an explicit long-term growth strategy?
Yeah, thank you, Rosa. I'll take that question. We do work with the county, and our projections do consider the missing middle and also the planned Langston Boulevard. And so we do take that into consideration. And what we mentioned in terms of like the swing space is that if we do see growth in the northwestern side of the county again, we are able to turn Nottingham into a neighborhood elementary school again. Many years ago, what used to happen is that we would lose possession of these schools. And so we don't want to, we still want to keep the school for APS. So we'll still be using it for APS. It would just not be a neighborhood school. But if we need to use it as a neighborhood school because of these things that are happening, then we will be able to use it as a neighborhood school. So absolutely, we are prepared for that.
Next question. There are 3 option schools in Zone 2 and 3. If the major renovations are for those zones or for Zone 4, why not convert one of the option schools into swing space?
We did not consider option schools for swing space, and there is a lot of reasons for that. The complexities for option schools are really difficult. They were already placed where they were, and I think my colleague can talk a little bit more about the option schools. But those are also already maxed. I mean, the option schools are full capacity, and so that's also something difficult to, in order to repurpose a option school is almost an impossibility, because we would have to do, I'm trying to process that, and that would be almost impossible because you can't have option schools and neighborhood schools. I think that's what they're trying to say, right? To make an option school a neighborhood school, but then the option school, you would still have to put an option school somewhere.
And if I can jump in and help Ileana, I think they're talking about making an option school a swing space, but we would have to find places for all the students who are in those option schools. But I think more importantly, this is not, the swing space is not an academic question. To have or not to have option schools is an academic decision made by the system. It is a commitment that is not, has not been part of the discussion about whether we're going to walk back option schools. We are looking to hold the status quo. We're going to have option schools. We're going to have neighborhood schools, and we would like to have swing space to accommodate neighborhood schools or option schools during their renovations. Mm-hmm. And I think Ileana is correct in pointing to the complexity of sending students home to home schools from option schools that doesn't really help with capacity issues per se. Does that help?
Yes, and I just wanted to quickly chime in as well. An important to underscore in regards to the role that option schools play is that they help us to manage enrollment. So because they don't capture a specific boundary, we can, depending upon numbers, we can decrease enrollment or we can increase enrollment. And so it really gives us a lot of flexibility, especially as we're seeing various trends. So if you're seeing enrollment increase at some of the neighborhood schools, we can open up additional slots for that year and so forth. So option schools do play a major part as we talk about student enrollment across the school division and helping us to balance it. So that is one of the tools and resources that we do have.
Thank you. We do have one more question. I don't know if we can get to it. I mean, we're supposed to end at 8, but okay, good. So why does APS find it acceptable to constantly shuffle and relocate neighborhood-based school populations? Can we find a longer-term solution to our constant redistricting woes? Recent examples also include McKinley and Patrick Henry. This is always deeply frustrating and disruptive to our communities.
Thank you. We'll take that more as a comment, and we'll go back, and we do have in our pre-CIP report, we have an analysis or evaluation of past processes, and it actually includes how our past processes, including some of the changes the school moves and our boundaries and how it has reflected positively, neutral, negatively. So I do encourage you to take a look at that. It's in our pre-CIP report. The title is Evaluations of Past Evaluations of our Past Processes. So I encourage you to take a look at that. We can post that too as an FAQ, and we'll link it in. So we do look at that. We reflect. It's almost like reflecting on the decisions that we've made in the past. And so I definitely encourage you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I guess I would just add that moving boundaries, shifting boundaries is one of the primary means we have of maintaining a distribution of students across our schools, trying to keep things from getting out of hand, keeping it manageable. And we make changes because our population is always changing.
We can take one more if you, Rosa, we have, yeah.
Sure, I'll go back up to the previous group and just pick one out of random that we might not have answered.
I didn't know we were caught up.
Oh, no, yeah, we only got 3 for this session.
Yeah.
Well, here's a good one from before. How many buses will be required to take students out of the neighborhood to the rezoned schools? How many buses will be required to bring swing space students into Nottingham?
Yeah, thank you. So once the board provides direction in October, then we'll be able to work with our colleagues in transportation and operations to figure that information out. So definitely we don't exactly know the number of buses because we don't know the school that's being renovated. So it's a little bit more complicated than just a number. But definitely once we get direction, we're going to be able to work with our colleagues and figure out all those logistics. And we do have time, you know, it's 3 school years from now. So we do have time to kind of mitigate that and think about that and be very methodical about that.
So that number of buses might change based on which school, like, you know, if they do a renovation and then they move to the next school to do another renovation, that number of buses might change every couple years or every year. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Well, I want to thank everyone for coming today and participating. If you want to see any of the sessions, if you missed any of the rotations, it will be available tomorrow on the Engage page, so you can watch the videos, as well as for all of the questions. We weren't able to answer them all, but we will try to answer as many as possible to get them uploaded in our FAQs, and just to continue to stay engaged throughout this process by visiting the Engage with APS page. We do occasionally do updates there, but then also to make sure you're reading your weekly Engage with APS emails on Thursdays, because important updates will be shared there as well. And then lastly, to participate in the thought exchange, which is one way that you can give your feedback, but you can also, if you have specific questions, please contact us by emailing engage@apsva.us. So thank you again so much for participating today, and have a good night.